I'm currently on board the Celebrity Xcel, which is Celebrity's newest cruise ship. I came on the sailing expecting it to feel like a familiar step forward from the earlier Edge class ships, and having been on the previous ships in this class, I thought I knew what this cruise would be like before we even boarded. But as soon as we started exploring, I realized there were things about this ship that didn't match what I thought I would find. Some parts were better than anything I've seen on Celebrity, and others left me genuinely confused about why certain decisions were made. So I've spent the last 5 days trying to figure out whether the Xcel is the best version of Celebrity yet, or if it's a beautiful ship with a few choices that hold it back. Guys, I'm gonna be honest, now that we're facing the end of the cruise, that question has gotten a lot more interesting than I expected. If you're ready, I am. Let's go. Embarkation onto the Xcel was surprisingly quick and easy. It was one of those boardings where you barely have time to pull up your boarding pass before you're already walking toward the gangway. There were no lines and no confusion. It was just a clean walk straight onto the ship. It was the kind of smooth start that sets the tone for a great cruise. I boarded onto the outdoor promenade of Deck 5 and stepped first into the art gallery. Now, I usually don't slow down in these spaces on day one, but there was this bright little glass sculpture that almost looked like a Pokemon someone had turned into fine art. And it made me pause for a second because everything around it was so serious. And it was just enough to catch my eye before we kept moving. A few steps later, we entered the Grand Plaza from the upper level, and the views there hit instantly. The iconic chandelier towers above the whole space, and from that angle, you're looking down past the railing toward the martini bar with the entire lounge layered below you. People were already stopping to take photos and grab that first I'm on vacation moment, and well, it was hard not to join them. From there, we walked through the new Celebrity flagship, which is part boutique and part museum exhibit. Some displays show off pieces of Celebrity's history, others highlight artwork or memorabilia, and a few things are actually for sale. It's an interesting little detour in the middle of Deck 5, and it wasn't something I was expecting to see right after boarding. That walkway leads into the digital archway tunnel where the dark passageway and bright LED arches create this fun, immersive feel as you make your way through it. It's short, but it pulls you into the next space in a way that makes you slow down without meaning to. And right past that was the entrance to the bazaar. And from the moment you reach the threshold, you can tell it's a space you're going to spend time trying to figure out during your sailing. The bazaar was the first space to really stop me in my tracks. It's big and dramatic, and it's a lot to take in all at once. There's a central bar that dominates the room with its own custom cocktail menu. There's a performance stage that sits in front of the giant windows, and those bright red and black designs that wrap around the arches like the ship is showing off a little. It felt like Celebrity wanted this to be one of the liveliest spots on board. And honestly, I could see why. But the longer I looked at the seating, the more I started to wonder how this space would handle a crowd. There aren't any real tiers, and everything is almost completely flat. It's beautiful, especially with the ocean backdrop behind the stage. But if you're not in the front row during a show, you're probably watching more heads in front of you than actual performers. Now, I'll say it didn't ruin anything. It just made me curious whether this bold design was going to be more form than function once the evening entertainment kicked in. To one side of the bazaar is spice, and the vibe there shifts immediately. The whole area is bright and fresh with green tile and a modern grab and go counter that looks like Celebrity's version of a trendy food hall. It feels casual in the best way with quick bites and sandwiches lined up on one side and a coffee and juice bar on the other. I like the energy of it right away. Still, the space isn't huge, so I couldn't help but wondering if this would turn into a bottleneck on sea days. Set behind the bazaar and down a deck is mosaic, and this space couldn't be more different. It's warm, moody, and dramatic with curved booths, deep colors, and floor-to-ceiling windows that flood the room with light. It feels like a high-end restaurant tucked inside the ship, and it's visually one of the most impressive spaces on the entire Xcel. But even in this first walkthrough, I found myself wondering how this atmosphere would pair with the ambitious menu everyone had been talking about. Once we looped around the upper level, the bazaar made even even more sense visually, but not entirely functionally. From above, you get a sweeping view of the whole space with the arches, the bar, the stage, and the ocean views, and it's stunning. But that's also where it hit me that this wasn't just a new venue. It was a completely new concept that Celebrity was trying to figure out in real time, and I wasn't sure yet how it was all going to come together once the ship settled into its rhythm for the week. But even with a few early questions, the space felt fresh and energetic, and it was clear the bazaar was going to be one of the most interesting places to understand on this cruise. After exploring the bazaar for a bit, we realized we were still carrying around our bags, and we decided to drop them off at our cabin. Our room was at the aft of the ship, just like the bazaar, so we headed up to deck 12 and started down the hallway. And I knew the Xcel only had two sets of elevators, but I didn't quite expect the walk from the aft stairwell to our aft cabin to be quite this long. It wasn't an issue for us, but it definitely surprised me how far back the rooms stretch on this ship. Once we stepped inside the cabin, the first thing that caught my eye was the balcony. Right there. For a standard stateroom, it was huge with that wide, open wake view that makes aft cabins feel special the moment you step outside. But the size didn't come with the seating I expected. There were no loungers at all, just two smaller chairs and a tiny table. And it made me wonder if we'd really be able to settle in out there the way we normally do. The view was perfect for relaxing, but the seating didn't quite match the space. And when the trundle bed was pulled out for the kids at night, it became nearly impossible to get to the balcony at all. The path from the bed to the door was so tight that you had to just angle yourself sideways and just try to squeeze past. It's the same trundle setup Celebrity uses on their other Edge class ships, but compared to other cruise lines, this particular style is harder to navigate when it's pulled out, and it's honestly less comfortable for families. And as far as the bedding itself goes, our kids who never complain about bedding mentioned how firm it was, and both of them woke up with sore backs the next morning. Inside the main sleeping area, the firmness theme continued. Celebrity usually leans toward comfortable bedding, so I wasn't prepared for a mattress that felt this solid. By day 2, people all over the ship were talking about it because nobody was sleeping well. There weren't any mattress toppers available either, which was surprising, especially for a premium line like Celebrity. It made me wonder if the mattresses were just brand new and needed time to soften up, or if Celebrity had simply chosen something firmer that most guests prefer. We also noticed something unusual for a brand new ship. The bed only has light switches and power outlets on one side. With how much we all need to charge these days, having no outlet on one side of the bed was an unexpected miss, and it meant juggling more chargers than we're used to when we cruise. And as we unpacked, we realized the storage situation was decent but not great. We used every bit of space we could find, including sliding our luggage under the bed, but there was room in the cabin for more drawers or shelves, especially near the balcony. For a 5-day cruise, it worked fine, but it did feel like a little extra storage would have gone a long way. The bathroom had its quirks too. The shower was actually more spacious than I expected for a standard stateroom, which was a nice surprise, but the water temperature tended to drift between warm and cold without warning. It wasn't drastic enough to really be a problem, but it was definitely noticeable. But even with a few quirks, the cabin gave us a comfortable home base for the 5 days we were on board, and that aft balcony view made a lot of the oddities easier to overlook. It wasn't perfect, but it had real potential, and in a few places, it feels like just a couple of small design tweaks could have made a big difference. Mosaic was our first dinner of the cruise, and for one simple reason. We love Eden so much on the earlier Edge class ships that we wanted to give ourselves the chance to eat a Mosaic twice if it turned out to be anywhere nearly as good. We didn't want to wait to the end of the cruise and regret not trying it sooner, so night 1 felt like the moment to really dive in. The menu at Mosaic was the first thing that really stood out, and I was thrilled to see that they brought back the jumbo lump crab cake from Eden because it is my favorite dish there and my favorite dish on any cruise ship. But the rest of the globally inspired menu from Eden we were used to had been replaced with a regionally themed one, so for us here in the Caribbean, that meant a Caribbean menu. It felt a little like Celebrity read what the popular dishes should be without actually tasting the authentic flavors of the region. Everything looked beautiful as Celebrity always nails the presentation, but the seasoning and depth weren't quite there. Even our kids' filet mignons, which visually looked to be a perfect medium rare, were both cold, which made me wonder if maybe the timing wasn't right and they sat for too long before the dishes were served. Now look, I'll say, if we weren't subconsciously comparing everything to Eden, I think we would have walked out of Mosaic thinking it was good, but not great. But because Mosaic sits in the same spot where Eden normally lives, and because Eden is our absolute favorite restaurant on any cruise ship at sea, it was impossible not to think about how Eden would compare. And in every meaningful way, Mosaic falls short of Eden's creativity and flavor. Now, I'll say the service was fantastic. It was friendly, well paced, and exactly the kind of polished experience we love about celebrity. And after dinner at Mosaic, we started piecing together how dining worked across the rest of the ship. And honestly, the included dining impressed us more than most of the specialty venues. Ocean View Cafe Buffet was laid out nicely with seating that had these incredible ocean views, and food was great throughout the cruise. Spice was another hit with its fresh grab and go options, and it's a spot you should definitely be intentional about because it's easy to miss since it's tucked off to the side of the bazaar. But the real stars were the main dining rooms. We ate there several nights and we were consistently impressed. One thing we love about Celebrity is that you're not locked into a set dining time. You just show up on works for you instead of having to plan around it. And having four different MDRs, each with their own theme and atmosphere, but sharing a core menu, but also having distinct options for the theme that fits the space, makes the experience feel more flexible and elevated than the traditional cruise setup. Now, I'll say specialty dining had its moments, but it didn't feel significantly better than those main dining rooms. Le Voyage was intimate with excellent service, and while the food presentations were absolutely gorgeous, the flavors didn't feel noticeably higher than what we had in those main dining rooms. Board Brunch was honestly much better than I expected it to be. Both Mackenzie and I both loved our dishes there, and although they were a bit too fancy for our kids, that says more about them than it does Board Brunch. And La Petite Chef, while adorable, especially for our kids, the food itself was more of a supporting character than a highlight. My favorite lunch on board came from an unlikely spot and is actually at Craft Social. There's a bartender there by the name of Elmer, who's one of those crew members you just don't forget. One of the things that truly amazed me about Elmer is Mackenzie and I went there one night, and I guess when you ring up the checks, it shows you who's in your room. Because he must have seen our kids, Kate and Jackson, because the next day I went there for lunch and they came up and met me there, and he knew Kate and Jackson's name, even though that was the first time he had ever met them. I don't know exactly how I did it, but I was so impressed. But it wasn't just about Elmer. The honey sriracha wings I had there were fantastic. Honestly, I would have been happy with those chicken wings anywhere. Now, something to note there, the food at Craft Social is extra, even though it's casual dining, but for us, it was worth every penny. So after 5 days on board, we realized that the included and casual dining options were the surprising culinary stars of the experience. The specialty venues definitely weren't bad, I'm not saying that, but they didn't feel essential in the way they often do on other cruise lines or even on other celebrity ships. Once we settled into the ship, a few spaces stood out right away. The Martini Bar in the Grand Plaza was an instant favorite. The chandelier show is as good as ever, and the bartenders were fantastic, but there were a few times it was difficult to find a seat, and I couldn't help but wonder what the space will feel like on holidays when every room is at max capacity. The club had a fun surprise tucked inside it. Attic is their new retro arcade. It ended up being a hit for both our kids and Mackenzie and I. It's one of those places where you pop in just to take a look around, and then 10 minutes later you're fully invested in a foosball rematch. The If You Know, You Know speakeasy was another interesting addition, but getting in required a lot more patience than I expected. The line there regularly stretches past an hour, and even though they handed out pagers after checking in so you could wait inside the club, they told us the signal didn't extend outside that space, and it had me checking the pager every few minutes and trying to time a quick restroom break without risk of losing our spot. Celebrity is usually a trendsetter, so seeing them jump in a trend that's already been done by so many other cruise lines felt a lot more like them saying, hey, we do that too. I actually prefer how the MSC World America handles their entry with the coin system, where you find a coin from crew members around the ship and reserve a time instead of waiting in line. Entering through a photo booth was a lot of fun though, and once the doors opened, we stepped into a foggy 1920 style speakeasy with surprise entertainment that changed through the night. Sometimes there's live music, sometimes a magician, and one night it even got rated speakeasy style. So you truly never knew what you were walking into. Your time there is limited to an hour, and your hour might be completely different from the hour before you or hour after you. So it's a fun surprise to see what you're going to find when you're there. The casino also impressed us. Celebrity expanded it into an adjacent space, so it never felt cramped, and as always, it's entirely smoke-free. That extra space made it the most comfortable casino we've ever seen in a cruise ship. You're not having to squeeze yourself between rows or games or anything like that. You can just walk freely and comfortably. Our kids enjoyed the kids club on board, and with only 22 kids under the age of 18 on this sailing, they had pretty much free roam of both Camp at Sea, which is for those that are under 13, as well as the basement, which is typically reserved for only teenagers. But they did tell us next week over Thanksgiving, there's going to be over 300 kids on board. And they said during Christmas and New Year's, it'll be closer to 700. So I'll be curious to see how those smaller kids clubs hold up when there's more kids on board. Up on deck 14, the solarium kept the calm vibe Celebrity is known for, which is actually right where I am right now. In fact, they removed the spa cafe, so it feels a bit different. But if it was still here, it would be right here where I'm sitting. The jogging track is one way, which means depending on where you're coming from or going to, getting to some areas of the ship may require you backtracking around the track or walking against the preferred route of traffic. The pool club was a great space, but we heard from multiple people in cabanas that service was almost non-existent, and they were having to grab their own drinks at the bar instead of the service promised to them for the premium that they paid for those cabanas, which made me wonder if this was just a growing pain of a new ship or if the cabana service just isn't a priority for Celebrity. The thermal suite has a few updates as well, including 3 times more heated loungers than earlier ships and the addition of the vitamin D deck where you can lay out, grab some shade, and just take in the sun. But the drawback here is the addition of that vitamin D deck means that those heated stone loungers no longer have ocean views because the vitamin D deck sits in front of them. They also added a small hydro pool, which was nice in theory, but the space is definitely tight and there's no stairs to enter that pool. So you have to sit on the edge and swing your legs around, which made me question how well will that work for somebody that maybe has some mobility challenges. And of course, the sunset bar was one of the best spots on the ship with beautiful views, great seating, and the perfect atmosphere. But its popularity meant the good spots go fast, and there were moments where I wished we'd shown up earlier to snag a seat. Even in just the 5 days we had on board, though, it was easy to see there is a ton to love on this ship. But there are also a handful of quirks that has me curious to see how everything will feel once the Excel settles into its stride. Entertainment on the Celebrity Excel was a blend of big polished productions and smaller pop-up shows across the ship, and both sides brought something memorable. Our 5-day sailing had only 2 main stage productions, but they were both genuinely impressive. The theater itself is a beautiful, wide sweeping space with curved seating, a massive wraparound LED screen, and a circular stage that feels immersive. But if you want good seats and a good view, you'll need to arrive at least 30 minutes early, and 45 is better. Made me wonder if this will be an issue on more popular sailings. The Bazaar hosted a rotation of smaller performances during the day and late evenings that were just as well done, but the layout definitely worked against them there. With flat seating and limited space, it meant you had to get there a solid hour early if you wanted to see anything besides the back of people's heads in front of you. My question: this space is designed more for atmosphere than viewing, which is a shame because the talent on board was truly excellent. The club kept things lively throughout the cruise as well, with live music, trivia, contests, and their brand new Saddle Up Saloon show that brought huge crowds when they did it. The space feels immersive, especially with the balcony seating and dark, moody lighting, and it became a surprise highlight on our sailing. Scattered across the ship were musicians, duos, acoustic guitarists, and small acts that filled every night with options. Even though we didn't spend a ton of time there, the magic carpet continued to be a cool visual feature with its part lounge, part bar, and part tender platform setup. And it looks cool as ever as it hangs out over the ocean with its cantilever design. Overall, the entertainment on the Excel was strong across the board. The only challenge here was less about what to see and more about making sure you could actually see it. The next time I sail on the Celebrity Excel, there are a few things I'll do differently. Our cabin on deck 12 was directly under the buffet's outdoor seating, and some mornings the sound of chairs scraping above us made for an earlier wake-up call than we really would have liked. So next time I'll choose one on a lower deck with no public spaces above it, below it, or on either side to make sure we get a quiet night's rest. I'd also lean more into the included dining instead of trying to check every specialty restaurant off the list. The MDRs, spice, and even the buffet were consistently good, and after a few meals, it became clear that the upcharge options weren't always significantly better. So I'll just enjoy the restaurants that shine rather than feeling like I need to try them all. I'll also make sure to catch at least one sunset up at the Sunset Bar. When the heat of the day passes and the sky starts changing color, that entire space feels like it was designed for that exact moment. Became one of my favorite spots in the entire ship, and next time I will intentionally plan that into my day rather than just popping in when I had a free moment. And I will definitely take advantage of the pool valet located between the main pool and solarium. This is one of the smartest new innovations on the ship because instead of having to hunt for an open chair to stash your things, you can put it somewhere secure behind a lock and key, and it just makes the whole process so much easier and less stressful. Honestly, guys, it's simple, practical. This is the exact kind of innovation I hope becomes standard across the entire industry. Sailing on the Celebrity Cell gave us a lot to love and a few things to think about. It is a beautiful ship with incredible spaces, strong entertainment, and some genuinely fun surprises. But it also had its moments that left me wondering how it'll really feel once the ship settles into its rhythm. It wasn't a perfect cruise, but it was a memorable one, and it reminded me just how differently each cruise line approaches design, dining, entertainment, and what a great cruise experience even means. And that's the part that really stuck with me because the more ships we sail, the more we realize just how much personality each cruise line has and how different the experience can be depending on the brand you pick. So if you're trying to figure out whether Celebrity is the right fit for you, or if another line matches the kind of cruise you're looking for, I put together a full breakdown ranking all of the major cruise lines based on our real experiences. It'll give you a clear picture of what each one does well, where they struggle, and which one might be the perfect fit for your next vacation. If you're ready, I am. Let's go.